Hello and welcome to Applicata Biblia. My name is Mark and thank you so much for stopping by as we look a little bit more into God's Word. Today we are continuing in our series, A Walk Through the Bible, where we look at characters of the Bible. Today we're going to be speaking about Lot and his wife, and we're going to actually get into a lot more than just that. There's so much packed into what we need to cover. Basically, we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 19, but we can't leave out chapter 18 either, because it's a very important chapter as well. So in chapter 18, God visits Abraham. Now, it's, when you look at it, it's very interesting to read. I don't want to say it's confusing, it's just interesting. Because Abraham sees these three men, or angels, if you will, and he understands them to be angels or whatever, and we don't know why exactly, but he entertains them and he invites them in. And they're talking to him, and they say, this time next year you will have a son. Sarah hears this, and she laughs. And he says, well, why did you laugh? She said, I didn't laugh. And he goes, oh, but you did laugh. But just know this, that you will have a son. So it's important to see that story in there, although it's not important to what we'll be talking about today. So that story's in there. There's these three men that show up, and one of them is Jehovah God, and I can't tell you how that works exactly, but Jehovah is either just communicating through them, and which we seem to know that much when we look at the fact that Moses wants to see the glory of God, but God tells him, if you see me in all my glory, you'll die. So however God works it, he's visiting Abraham here. Whether it's through angels, these men who are angels, which may just be messengers of God. It's really interesting to see that. And I think there are a lot of things that we can't know about exactly how the spirit world works and how God works everything. But it's an interesting thing to see. So two of these men are going to move on into chapter 19. But before they do, God is contemplating, should I tell Abraham that I'm going to destroy the cities on the plain? There's these 5 cities that he's going to destroy. Should I do that, is what he asks. He's contemplating. And of course, it's kind of raised like, the wording is like, should I tell him? But it kind of ends up being more like he is telling Abraham that he's going to do this. And Abraham starts to deal with God. He says, well, are you going to destroy everybody? He's probably thinking about Lot being over there, his nephew. He says, if you can save, if 50 people are worthy to be saved, maybe you should save them. And God says, yeah, okay, yeah, well, I can save. I can not destroy the cities if there's 50 people. And Abraham goes, well, how about if there's 45? And he starts dealing with God. He starts negotiating with God, and he gets it down to like 20 people or 10 people. He's like, how about 40? How about 30? How about 20? And he gets it down to like 10 people, and God says, okay, for 10 people, and I won't destroy the cities. And the point about that part of the story is that's how far gone these cities are. And I think there are some YouTube videos out there in that region that show these unburnt pieces of sulfur out there that reveal some sort of cataclysmic fire of sulfur and sort of this calamity of fire that happened in that region. So these angels go into the area where Lot is staying, Lot and his family. And we're going to pick up that story there in chapter 19. We're just going to read a little bit about it, and we're going to leave out a lot of it. And when I teach the class to younger students, which I don't do anymore, but when I did, there was a lot that I would leave out because I think it's really a very mature subject matter to begin with. And so it's really kind of tough to kind of dance around on the issues here, because the biggest problem with these cities is their sexual sin. And this is God showing his people. That's the main message that we need to get across on this, is his disgust of overt sexual sin. So picking up in chapter 19 and verse 1, the two angels came into Sodom at evening, and Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom, and Lot saw, and he rose up to meet them and bowed his face to the earth, and he said, "Behold now, my lords, please turn into your servant's house and lodge, and wash your feet, and rise early and go your way." And they said, "No, for we will lodge in the street." And he much urged them, because he knows what's going on in that city. And they turned into him and came into his house, and he made a feast for them, and he baked unleavened cakes, and they ate. Before they lay down, even the men of the city, the men of Sodom, circled the house, from the young to the aged, to all the people from its limits. And they called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them." They want to sexually assault these men. And he said to him, "My brothers, please do not act evilly. Now, behold, now I have two daughters who have not known a man. Please let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you see fit. Only do not do a thing to these men. On account of this, they came into the shade of my roof." Now, that is disgusting, right? I don't know what to say about that. But the men put out their hands and brought Lot into the house, and shut the door. And they struck the men at the door of the house with blindness, from the small to the great, and they struggled to find the door. And the men said to Lot, "Who still is here to you? Bring out of this place your sons and your sons-in-law and your daughters and whoever belongs to you in the city," which is interesting that they would ask that, I think. "For we are about to destroy this place, for the cry of them is great before Jehovah, and Jehovah has sent us to destroy it." So it's important to understand this. The sin is crying out to God. It's not that the people are crying out to God to save them. It's their sin that's crying, these injustices that are crying out to God. "And when the dawn rose, then the angels urged Lot, saying, 'Rise up, take your wife.'" And 14, I missed that. He went out to speak to his sons-in-law, those taking his daughters, and he said, "Rise up, go out from this place, for Jehovah is about to destroy the city." And he seemed as one joking to his sons-in-law. So these men were obviously betrothed to his daughters. They were not married in the sense that we would know it today. They were still betrothed. And he goes to get his sons-in-law, and they think he's joking. "And when the dawn rose, the angels of the Lord urged, saying, 'Rise up, take your wife and your two daughters who are found, lest you be cut off in the depravity of the city.' And he lingered. And the men lay hold of his hand and his wife's hand on the hand of his two daughters, Jehovah having mercy on him. And they caused him to go out, and they put him down outside the city." So, I don't know, they picked him up, they flew away with him, I don't know what. But he lingers, and these angels from God, these men, whatever you want to call them, physically take him and his family out, except for his son-in-laws, I'm assuming. This is the way it reads. And it happened as they led them outside, he said, escape for your life. Do not look behind you and do not stay in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest you be swept away. And Lot said to them, please, no, Lord. Behold, now your servant has found grace in your sight. And you have magnified your mercy, which you have done to me in saving my life. And am I not able to escape? I am not able to escape to the mountain, lest some evil overtake me and I die. Please now, this city is near to flee there, and it is a little one. Please let me escape there. Is it not a little thing that my soul may live? And they said to him, see, I have lifted up your face so as to this thing, without overthrowing the city which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I am not able to do anything until you have come there. So the name of the city is called Zoar. The sun had gone forth on the earth, and Lot came into Zoar, and Jehovah rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah, and there are some other cities as well, and from Jehovah out of the heavens. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all those living in the cities and the produce of the ground. And his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham started up early in the morning, going to the place where he had stood before Jehovah, and he looked toward the face of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he saw the smoke. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. There's a lot more. The stories, there's a lot, like I say, there's parts of the story after this that I just don't even include for younger audiences, because it's bad enough already, right? The sexual sin that we're talking about is bad enough already. But then it starts getting into incest and all this stuff, and it's just kind of it was just too much for me to leave that part in the book. But so here's this part of Abraham's life. He was just promised that he's going to have this son. He's told this time next year you're going to have a son. Then in the next chapter, we see God going out and destroying cities because of their sin. And we have to understand God's position on sexual sin. And this goes all the way back, okay, to Genesis chapter 3 and chapter 2, I should say, where we see God stop all of creation. He creates a woman for man. And that is the way things are supposed to go. But then we see mankind committing all kinds of sexual sin. We saw it right here, where these men were seeking to have sexual relations with these angels. And that's how depraved they had become, and that is just abhorred by God. And even in today's society, we don't want to talk about that. We want to pretend like that's not the case, that God loves everybody. Well, God does love everybody, but it doesn't matter if it's this, if I can't commit sexual sin that God has declared wrong, and neither can anybody else, and it doesn't matter what form that might look like. It is abhorrent to God because it goes against the natural order of things from the beginning. That's just the way it is. So what are some of the issues going on here, and what do we see? And really the only reason why I put this story in here was because of Lot's wife. And you kind of can't tell the story of Lot's wife without understanding the level of debauchery that was going on in the land. It was so terrible and that deep. And God was just really unhappy with it, enough that he feels the need to destroy it with fire. Remember a couple of lessons ago, God says he's not going to flood the earth again to destroy the entire earth, but he might use fire, and he does. And he starts right here, and we see that happening right here. And I'm not saying that's fulfilling that sort of prophecy or anything like that. I just think this is what we're going to see God doing. So in the book, I have some very simple questions. And now, first and foremost, we have some things here that have to do with the spirit world and God visiting people on the earth. And we can't know exactly how things looked and worked. It seems to me that when Lot and when Abraham see these men or angels or whatever it is we want to call them, they recognize that they're not regular men, and I don't know how that works. You know, there's no description on how it works. We just have to read it for what it is. What can we conclude about them? How did they travel? Will they walk? And you know, did they look different than anyone else? I don't know. I'm assuming they must have looked a little bit different. I think it's interesting that they're telling Lot, you know, who are the people that belong to you? Didn't they know? And maybe it was more like a rhetorical question, like whoever belongs to you, you need to go get him, right? It was like, you know, because when we look at what Lot's doing here, it's like he's not getting the gravity of what's going on here. I mean, he is he's in big trouble. So, and the other thing I wanted to cover in the questions is how many of the men surround this house to assault these men. And it's basically all the men of the city. That's how depraved things had become. And so what do you think, just going through Lot's mind when he offers up his daughters? Well, he's trying to protect these men who I'm assuming he thinks they're from God, and he doesn't want to get in trouble for that. But it's like, you don't just give up your daughters like that. Dude, this must have been very dire at that time. And here's the contrast that as Christians or anybody, we need to see. Here he is in a situation where he sees how dire it is, to the point where he's offering his daughters. What kind of dad are you? That's my first question, right? Just right off the bat is, dude, what's wrong with you? Now, I don't have any ground or any footing to accuse Lot of anything. And in fact, Lot is regarded as wanting to be holy in a land where a lot of unholy people lived. And so that is the final say on that. But he's obviously seeing how dire it is. And so there are big questions, like it seems like Lot didn't want to leave, even though sin was everywhere, and even though he's being told the place is going to be destroyed. What does that tell us? And I think that is a big message for anybody, for all of us, right? You know, Jesus, when he's speaking to his disciples, he's telling them, you know, you're going to have to be in the world, but you are not to be of the world. In other words, you're going to have to deal with sin. And it's not going to be, and it's enough, you know, obviously, that we all have to deal with the sin that we commit. It's bad enough that we have to get that out of our life and stay away from it any way we can and all of that. But then we have neighbors, and we have leaders, and we have bosses, and we have co-workers and friends and everybody else. Hopefully, if they're friends, they're not affecting us. We're not unequally yoked. But we're in the world trying to shine a light of Christianity. And in this case, we see that Lot, and this is just my opinion from the way I see it, Lot and his wife had just become very comfortable. They, you know, okay, yeah, everybody around is sinning, but this is a good life here, relatively speaking, for whatever reason. I've got a couple of boys over there that are going to marry my daughters. And obviously, when they split up, Lot had lots of things he could take with him. He had property when he left. So he goes into this city as a merchant or whatever he ended up doing, or as a farmer, or as a, you know, he continued raising sheep or whatever. But he was comfortable enough that when agents of God are telling him, we're going to blow this place up, he's like, well, you know, well, maybe we should. And they're like, no, let's go. And they have to grab him and pull him out of there. And, you know, that's that's a message for every Christian. That's a message for me and anybody. Even if you're not a Christian, if you get too comfortable with sin, if I get too comfortable with sin, it could absolutely and will be absolutely to my own detriment. And that is why in the scriptures we're told not to be unequally yoked. We recognize the threat and we remove ourselves from the threat, or we change that, right, situation. Like if it's a person that is maybe wanting to cause us to sin, we try to change that person. If they don't want to change, we remove ourselves from that. And this is usually what I tell, my younger students is always be on guard for your own souls, because God wants to protect you, and this is what He's trying to do here. And unfortunately, they just grew too comfortable with their surroundings, so comfortable that even Lot's wife looks back. They're told, don't look back. And she looks back. And she turns into a pillar of salt. That's how it's defined. And for her, I think the abstract thought of what she did was she was mourning for the loss of the life that she was losing. Even though, and so this is the issue, even though she wasn't counting the cost on her for living in that life. Maybe she was sinning, I don't know. But instead of looking back, she would have done better to look forward in God for what God was going to provide next. And I know that's easier said than done, especially to have your life just completely uprooted. And sometimes these kinds of things happen. But this is what, for me, the main message of Lot's wife is don't get too comfortable in the world. And Jesus speaks to that quite often, that we are not to love the world, and in that sense that we love the sin in the world. We are to love the people in the world because God loves the people in the world. We are to love the souls in the world, but we are not to become of the world. It's that simple. So that's the message. I think that's all I had. Let me check here real quick. I think, one of the additional things that is said is that Lot was saved because God remembered Abraham. And so it's interesting to see that in this section we don't see Lot was saved because he was so great and holy, although we find out later that he is. And there are some things that Lot does that are not good at all. He sins pretty egregiously, but that's his problem. And because we all have that problem. Okay, so that's it. Basically, Christians are not to be unequally yoked with the world at large, and that means our friendships, or anything that's going to remove our focus from God. And that was a problem for Lot during this time. It's very obvious. He can't even get up and go when his life the city is going to blow up, basically. And anyway, that's the message. Thank you so much for stopping by. And we're going to get into the next one, and I think that one is on Isaac, who is Abraham's son. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.